Everything we do is merely a distraction from the absurdity of our existence. We are attempting to distract ourselves from the void. If you strip life down to the basics, we wake up, we do tasks, we chase goals, and once we hit those goals, we just chase new goals, and then we repeat this cycle. And underneath all of that, there is a sort of quiet, uncomfortable truth. We don't really know why we're here. I am a big fan of the philosopher Albert Camus. If you guys don't know, he is regarded as one of the fathers of absurdism, which is pretty much the idea that like life, it's like nihilism, but nihilism is all like dreadful. It goes like beyond nihilism where it's like nothing matters, so everything's absurd, so just sort of do what you want. Because when you really think about it, everything kind of amounts to nothing. You could do really good at a certain thing or really bad, and at the end of the day, you still go back to your bed and you sleep, and you're still going to die one day. And everyone you know is going to die, and we're all going to be forgotten. Busyness sort of keeps us from sitting with this question for too long, because in a way, it's unbearable. The idea that we have to go through so much pain and suffering in life and so many Kafka-esque moments it's like too much to really like comprehend and internalize. So instead, we go to work every day. The novel, I recommend this to you guys, The Stranger by Camus. It's a story about a guy who gets convicted of a crime, and it's his trial. And on the trial, you know, the main character is being questioned, and he's completely indifferent. Like, he doesn't care whether or not he gets convicted. He doesn't care about anything. He's just so blunt and straightforward about it all. And then it to a point where it's so raw that it makes other people uncomfortable or like concerned with the guy. Like, how does this guy not care? But if we're being honest, most likely that is probably the realest way that you can treat any given situation. It's like, well, I will definitely one day no longer be here. And so it doesn't make sense to have so much anxiety about everything and to care so much, because that only leads to more suffering, right? Work is essentially structured distraction. So careers, they give us a false sense of identity and purpose. And what's sad is, like, as time is going on, and we all know this, and if you're a fan of my channel, you know that how I feel about this, but that we're starting to recognize that there is no purpose, there is no identity in your work. And so the idea is still there where it's like, oh, yes, I'm doing something with my day. Like, you can check that box. Like, today wasn't a waste because I did something. But only a slave quantifies its existence through productivity. So we've basically been brainwashed by hustle culture to believe that we have to go and do things. But deeper than that, it's just like we do things because if we're busy, then our thought in our brain is occupied on those tasks, as opposed to asking the existential questions about our life. In promotions, money, titles, these things, they give you a false sense of meaning, but only within the system that they're configured in. So if you go outside of the system, it really doesn't matter. One thing, I was talking to my friend about this a couple months back, and I said, it's crazy to think about how, like, let's say you on an individual scale, you have this one job and you're so concerned about all the aspects of this one job and everything that's related to completing the task that you're supposed to be doing. But there is another world where you're living in a different area, you have a different job, like your life is completely different, and you're not worrying about those things, but those things would still go on with or without you. And I think this shows the absurdity that is, it's like, so we, like, from an individual, not from a massive standpoint, but from an individual standpoint, like, it really doesn't matter what you do, because unless you're like some Elon Musk type person, which no one watching this video is, if you were to no longer do your daily tasks, what you're doing, it's really not going to have any major impact, which then tells us that those things in and of itself and you by proxy don't really matter. And it sounds dreadful, but it could be, I'm viewing it more in a freeing way where it's like, oh, nothing matters and we can do whatever we want. You know what I mean? And I'm gonna actually do I want to do a video soon recommending books for you guys because I have a bunch. And like I've just been reading. I'm very much into philosophy, as many of you guys know. And like all these books that I'll like read, there just seems to be like a common theme in philosophy where every philosopher from different countries and different centuries and all this stuff, they all tackle this same idea of like, why is it that we're here? Like, what are we doing here? You know? And this goes back, as somebody who's studied like the vast majority of philosophers, this goes back to the ancient philosophers in Greece, right? In Athens. Like Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, they all were like, they believed that mankind naturally is drawn to the idea of God. But they also tackled ideas of like God being just the universe, and like, so like Plato pretty much believed that was it Plato? I'm forgetting who it was, which one of the ancient ones it was. But they believed that like the universe and the world just always existed. It was the alpha and the omega. Like it wasn't bound by time. It just always was. And there was no conception point to it. And I find this fascinating because when you really dig into science, you just realize that like there really makes no sense to it. There inevitably has to be a question that cannot be answered by we're limited by human consciousness not to answer. Because if you're an atheist and you believe in the universe, well, where did the first cause start? Like, how did everything start? Even if you're a believer in God or whatever religion you believe in, that also begs the question. You have to have faith. You have to have belief in something that cannot be explained as well. So everything just like no matter how you look at things, it always just seems to point back to absurdism. You know, like what is the reason we're here? And then what happens is we use entertainment as an escape. You're watching this video as an escape. I mean, that's the irony of this. People do endless scrolling, binge watching, gaming, and we're at a point now where it's not even just my generation, it's also the older generations. They might not be scrolling on TikTok, but they're watching the news. They're still watching all this various slop that's just designed, that's been Mr. Beastified to be really easy to consume. It's kind of soulless. It doesn't have much merit to it. And because silence feels heavy, we fill it. I mean, back in the day, if you used to exercise, like that would be the thing that you were doing, is exercising. Now you have earbuds in while you're exercising. You can go on your phone while you're walking on the treadmill. You know, you're in the shower. You can listen to music. You had a portable speaker. Like, there's always something to fill the silence. And the repercussions of this are kind of hard for us to understand because, number one, we don't know the long-term effects yet because, you know, this technology is like really in the past like 10 to 15 years has been created. But number two, it's like, well, what would our lives be without it? It's hard for our generation to even understand because we grew up at the conception of this very thing. The moment that there's nothing stimulating us, existential thoughts creep in. And that is like, it's pretty much horrifying if we're being brutally honest. You know, we start to look for relationships and validation, right? Love, attention, approval. They are anchoring us. And because most people are afraid to admit the truth, and a lot of the truth is that like when what we seek for in relationships is often not the value and the merit of the relationship itself, but it's that we don't want to be lonely. You know, I mean, that is the truth. I'm not sure this is true like universally. I'd have to think about it more. But at least in my case, it just seems like people like do things like seek relationships, they seek validation. They don't want to feel alone. When you feel alone, you're essentially forced to think about your existence, and then that's when existentialism creeps in. So we often are seeking people not just for connection, right? We don't necessarily care about them in terms of what it is that who they are, but it's like what they can do for us. We want to avoid being alone with our thoughts. One very interesting thing that I've been thinking about before, and I'm sure there's like a terminology for this, but it's like, what if like relationships, you know how like some people love their spouse so much that they'll die for them, which is 100% true. That's a reality. Some people, parents love their children so much that they'll die for them, all this stuff. But it's sort of my theory that I'm tackling, and I'm not sure, I haven't put enough thought into this, but that you love your spouse so much because your spouse makes you feel good. It's not like out of altruism. It's because they make you feel good. They make you feel complete. You put a sense of your identity in them. And children is the most amplified city upon a hill pinnacle of this idea, where it's like children are an extension of the ego. And so parents will die for their children because it is like their greatest accomplishment. It is like their magnum opus in life. It is what makes them feel complete. And so although it is external to them, like that is a separate sentient being, they still view it as like the highest version of themselves, weirdly, if that makes sense, if you're following. And so they'll die for them because the idea that they would live without this thing would just shrivel their entire identity and everything with it. And that might be a rather negative way to look at things, and I certainly could be wrong. I haven't given enough thought to that, but it kind of like makes sense to me. It's like, because if you think about it, like biology, we're designed to just above all else prioritize survival. And then it's like, so why would somebody like lay down their life for someone else? Well, it's because like this idea of like love and fulfillment comes from your relationship with others, but really that's like a mask for you just being lonely and wanting something greater than yourself. And then you're putting yourself in something else because it makes you feel like that, if you're following what I'm saying. But yeah, being alone, it exposes absurdity far more clearly. As somebody who spent most of my life alone, I can tell you 100% this is true. When I was in my later years of high school, when I was a sophomore, COVID hit. When COVID hit, I didn't go out or hang out with anybody until the end of high school after that. Like nobody. I would spend all my time alone. I would read a lot of books. I was working a lot of jobs. I was very depressed because I would just sit there and think about life, and none of my answers ever really made sense. And I was always drawn to the conclusion of like life is just absurd. And pretty much the only thing that gave me any sense of relief in terms of my anxiety and all this stuff was Christ, which is why I'm a Christian. But different people have different experiences, you know? But then you get to this idea of like goals, self-improvement, right? Like the optimized future version of yourself. You're telling yourself, once I achieve this, I'll feel complete. And that's just it. You're chasing an emotion. But every time you get there, you'll realize that that emotion is something that you could have chosen all along. Like if you're seeking something because you think that you're going to get a certain emotion, then you already understand right now how emotions are created. And therefore, that means that material success or that different goal that you're going to hit in your life, it does not equate. I've said this before. I think that winning a championship, like if you're a football player and you win the Super Bowl, that has to be the most underwhelming experience ever, because you're literally like, you work so hard for something, then you get there and then you realize, oh, like this is it. Like there's nothing more than this. And so I like firmly believe that it's really not fulfilling. Like you get like almost depressed sometimes, like when you win that big, because you're like, dang, like it really is the journey, right? It's not the destination. The chase itself keeps us distracted. So we'll just keep on working and working and working, and then maybe we'll be fulfilled. But after every achievement, there's a very short high, which is then followed by a sense of emptiness. In my experience in life, this has always been true. It's like I'll give you guys an easy example. So I do social media, and like let's just take like Instagram followers as an example. Like I was like so hyped at the idea of me getting 1,000 followers, and then I got there and I was like, oh, I want 5,000 now, and then I got to 5,000, I'm like 10,000, and so on and so forth. And every time that I would hit a goal, hit one of those marks, I literally just like wouldn't care. I wouldn't feel fulfilled at all. I'd always want the next one. Like I want to hit the one after that, right? And it never ends, bro. It never ends, and it's a distraction. The continued chase, I feel like, is an innate part of us humans, which pretty much has been passed down because it's advantageous for us not to get super existential, because then we'd get, suicidal. Like these things would start to haunt us if we had so much time to think. The absurdity itself, like we're conscious beings aware that we will die, It's just it's weird. Consciousness is absurd in and of itself, and there's no matter to it. It doesn't, you can't track consciousness. It just is something that exists, we search for meaning in a universe that doesn't explain itself, and that there is knowledge, esoteric knowledge. There's, different forms of knowledge outside of empirical knowledge that we simply can't know, that are above humans' ability to comprehend and understand. We could try to make sense of it the most that we can, but in a weird way, trying to make sense of it only leads to more suffering. And this sort of tension, it is uncomfortable. It's almost comical. Like, it's so ridiculous. Like, what really are we doing here? It doesn't make sense. Let's just fill our time with work, because then we don't have to think about it. And this begs the question, is distraction even necessary? Maybe distraction is not weakness. Maybe it's actually just survival. Like I was telling you, like, you wouldn't be able to deal with life if all you did was think about why we're here and then never get a solid answer. So maybe distraction is just a survival distraction could be like a survival instinct. Humans might need illusions of meaning in order to function. I mean, like, if you were to tell an athlete who dedicated their life to winning an Olympic medal, that doesn't matter, and after they worked super hard and got that medal, then like that's just gonna shatter their scope of their life. And so I think there's certainly an argument to be made that it is unethical, unmoral to try to convince people to switch what they perceive to be their meaning in life, because that's what's getting their engines to run. You know what I mean? If you sort of collapse that idea, then you're inflicting a lot of harm on them. Without distractions, motivation collapses. Without meaning, motivation collapses. And so we wouldn't be where we're at today as a society. We wouldn't have all the technological advances, because if Nikola Tesla believed that creating the alternate current was useless and it didn't matter in the end because he was going to die, he would have never made it. And then the alternate current, which is used in every single household today, wouldn't exist, and we'd have much worse electricity. And it's certainly food for thought. I personally find it all fascinating. But the worst part about it is, in you watching this, like, I don't know the answer. No one that no matter how smart an individual, they don't know the answer either. It's just life, man. You essentially gotta create your own meaning, or get into religion, I mean, that's pretty much the only like solid answer to that. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Thank you guys for watching.